All right, folks. Today we're joined by Sam Logan. Sam Logan is a former classmate of mine. Well, our classmate, but I don't think we had classes together. We attended college at the same time at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Maranatha Baptist University. At the time, Maranatha Baptist Bible College, and we're going to be going over a lot of things about our culture that are probably going to be unique to most people. It's hard to explain the background that we have if you weren't there to actually experience it. But before we get started, Sam, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and like how you grew up and where you grew up and your philosophy in life?
Oh, okay, yeah. As far as where I grew up, yeah, pretty straightforward kindergarten to 12th grade, all through college at a Christian fundamental Baptist education. And yeah, very much in that bubble from day one. Very Republican, very Christian, very uh King James-ish for a bit, depending in some circles. And for those who know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And yeah, very much going to church 3 times a week, Wednesday, twice on Sunday. Yeah, that was my life for quite a bit from the beginning. Yeah.
The the King James thing you mentioned, for those of you who aren't aware, there was a sect. It's a lot smaller now. It's a lot
Yeah.
smaller now than it was 25, 30 years ago, who were adamant on the idea that other Bible versions other than the King James version were off the table. Like the King James Bible in English
Yeah.
is they call it the authorized version, which I gotta say, even when I was a dyed in the wool fundamentalist Baptist, never made sense to me. Never made any sense at all. I never bought it for a second. And I didn't even know about the fact that the King James Bible was written in 1611 and altered 7 or 8 times since then. That if you read an actual 1611 Bible, it's a lot more difficult to understand. But like the idea that God, if you were to assume that God's word is the actual authoritative word of God, and it's in different languages, why would one translation in one particular language have any more weight than another? It never made sense to me.
But yeah, that was one of the influences in my life that I know that I had uh that I loosened up on. Of I mean, the Bible is still important to me, but it I don't find other versions to be offensive. Whereas before I was like, oh no, it was just it was right up there with everything else of just doing the with the Ten Commandments and everything else. Like this was the way to go. Um, it was to if your Bible didn't have the these and thous in there, you just weren't doing it right, man.
I know, right? It's. I remember when I was in high school, we went to some camp in Arkansas, and there was a speaker there, and he said that he would he uses the pages of the NIV Bible as toilet paper. And I went to my pastor at the time, and I was like, I mean, doesn't that kind of seem out of line here? Like, even if you think the NIV is an imperfect translation like that, I was like, why would you say that? Like, to be that hardcore about one particular translation, not even the first English translation, by the way. Like, there were other English translations before that, and you had William Tyndale and John Wycliffe. I mean, people have been working on this for years, and
Yeah.
like no one that wrote the Bible spoke English. Why do we care so much about it? It never made sense to me.
Right. Now it kind of depends on, especially when you're arguing about what changes. Now I understand if things are consciously being changed, not for translation reasons, but just like out of like preference. Like I'd heard something about, didn't Thomas Jefferson take out, or somebody, and maybe it was Thomas
Yeah,
Jefferson, somebody took out like all the references to blood or things like that out of the Bible. I may be making this up, but that type of thing where you're not doing it for translation reasons, but more like out of preferential reasons. you're cutting things up, taking things out just because you don't like it. And when, in fact, why they did things like make the New King James Version, why they did a lot of stuff, was to make it more understandable.
Yeah.
They realized in certain points along the way, hey, people aren't connecting with this. People aren't understanding this, and they have to in order to, follow the faith. So it makes sense to make it more understandable.
Yeah.
That's
W- w-
not now. Now you can get into other things, and there is other, hypocrisies and things that you can point out. You can point out that people, print this in order to make a bunch of money, which is also true. But as far as making it more understandable, you'd think that's God's work, not the devil's.
Yeah, you're referring to the Jefferson Bible. That's a real thing. Thomas Jefferson, he took the New Testament and he removed all of any mention of the supernatural, like anything that couldn't possibly exist in the natural world, and compiled, what he could from that. And it was the Jefferson Bible, which no one would ever count as a scholarly, interpretation of the Bible at all. But yeah, so that's true. I will say this though. The King James version is my favorite version to quote, because I find the prose beautiful. Like I do. I find like the actual the way the words flow, and it has an old-timey ring to it.
Yeah,
And saying, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life, in like modern vernacular is not going to hit as well. It's not. And it's like, yeah, there is something to that. So like
yeah,
I think that's really what it is, that
yeah. It's a
people.
it's a style preference.
Yes,
It comes off more authoritative.
it does. It
Um,
does.
on top of, yes, it being, I think, the poetry of it. I think that's probably one of the reasons why I think I probably ended up floating to Shakespeare so much. Again, a lot of writing from the 1600s that has this, I don't know, great picture and also authoritative. There's a profoundness to it that you get, as opposed to, yeah, putting it in a more modern vernacular of God died a long time ago and he did it for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember seeing this article, and I was in college. I worked security in college, and there was this website. I think it was called Listverse that I went to. No, it was Cracked. It was cracked.com. And
Oh yeah.
someone wrote an article where they replaced every instance of the word behold in the Bible with look buddy. And it was hilarious. It was just like, look, buddy, unto you this day is born a child in a manger. Hilarious. But I mean, like, it's just like, yeah, it's we'll get into that later on. But it's like that wasn't the first crack in the armor for me, but it was just so ridiculous that, and only like old people seem to believe. I even like the arguments for it too. I remember talking to this guy who was younger than me, and he said that, well, the King James Bible is correct because the Bible says that you purify silver 7 times, and it's the best it can be, and the King James Bible has been updated 7 times. It's like that is the dumbest argument. In a strong field of competition, that is the dumbest argument I have ever heard. Like, so you're saying it was
Yeah.
bad on number 6 and it will be bad on number 8? It's just like, God, like
Yeah.
the mental gymnastics you have to do to buy into that is just nonsense. But anyway, I wanted to get to you more about your personal stuff. Like, so I don't know like exactly like what your religious views are now, and I'll go first with mine. Is that I don't believe in a deity or deities at all, and I have been fascinated to watch the evolution of my compatriots that grew up in this religious sect, and seeing how they splintered off. And so where do you fall on the spectrum?
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not surprised to where you're at because I've thoroughly enjoyed your TikToks and everything, and hearing from your perspective of where you're at. I found it interesting, even if I'm, not coming from that. I'm not. I'm in a different place. I still find your insights very interesting, by the way. Um, where at least where I'm at, I do go to church on Sunday. I had though my religious views have kind of moved differently in the area of, at least in the bubble that I grew up in, I don't see the world as a scary place. I don't see people who think different than me as the enemy, and I don't see God as closed-minded as the people who instructed me.
Hmm.
There is a lot of fear that is taught in Christianity, at least from when I was growing up in. There was less be like Christ, and there was more like don't be like the world. Don't wear clothes like them. Don't act like them. Don't talk like them. There's a danger there. There was a lot of that. Whereas I found that that was a lot of superficial things that were emphasized. What I have found is that faith and religion is a more personal, individual thing. It's something that has to start from within and be there. It has to be mine. What I found is Christianity kind of goes in three different stages. You have if you grow up the way I did, you have your parents' faith, then you have your church's faith, and then you have yours. Because I think you might have noticed this phenomenon too. The Christianity that preached in church is different from the Christianity you would necessarily practice at home. And then there's the Christianity that you would experience for yourself and what you would individually practice. Especially once you are an adult and maybe being able to make your own decisions as freely as a person. Uh, so I found that to be the case. Also, that yeah, the world's just not that scary, and also I'm not scared that people think differently than me. Whereas before, uh, it was really put as a us versus them mentality. That if people didn't think the way we believed, that they were, we're in a spiritual battle, brother, and you can't, associate with these people. You can't work with these people. They have to be avoided. They'll influence you. Um, so yeah, that's a bit of where I'm from.
That's uh that's a very good synopsis. And there's a lot of points I want to hit on that. The first thing you mentioned was the fear. And one thing that I've noticed is that the old time religion, like the fire and brimstone stuff, has really fallen off. If you went to church in the 90s or early 2000s, you could pretty much bank on hearing a message about how the torments of hell would haunt you, or how your loved ones would suffer for eternity. And if you want to escape that, you need to follow the teachings of Christ and renounce your sin and all that stuff. But that that doesn't happen nearly as much anymore. Like now, it's more of a. I mean, I don't know if they still call it seeker friendly. That's what they called it back, in the days I remember. But that now it's like, hey, come follow Jesus, and he'll make your life better. And follow Jesus, and you'll experience more joy. And like they're leaning way more into the carrot than they are into the stick. And I that is incredible to me because if you really do think that someone is going to be tortured for eternity, that's a good thing. Like you're like, hey, listen, I need to warn you. Like you need to get
Yeah,
away from this.
yeah.
And but it's not working because it's incredibly off-putting. And one thing I like to so whenever I talk to uh believers that I still know, and uh I ask them about hell, because hell is a really good topic, I think. And I'll ask them, listen, do you think, like, knowing me, the person you've known for 10, 15, 20 years, do you think that I am so evil that I deserve to be tortured and burned and eaten by maggots for eternity? Like, have my actions been so vile, so despicable that I deserve that? And the answer is always the same. The answer is, well, I mean, I just believe what God says. No, 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 no. I don't want to know like what God says. I'm asking you as a person. Like, if you were calling the shots, would you think that's a fair punishment? And they'll say, well, listen, I think I deserve it too. It's like, no, 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 no. I'm just saying, do you believe that is fair? The answer is no. The answer is an obvious no. That makes no sense at all. And everyone knows it. So they can't discard this teaching of hell because it's so ingrained into at least our version of Christianity. So they
Right.
try to preach the seeker friendly part. And what one that really gets me is when people they kind of dial back like how bad hell actually is. Like it's separation from God. It's not actually torment, it's just separation from God. And you'll be fine. You just won't be in the presence of God. It's like, okay, or hey, everyone goes to heaven anyway. It's like, okay, so then why bother following the religion? Like it's a house of cards that falls apart really quick whenever I have this discussion. Have you run across that? I don't even know your opinions on that. Like, what are your opinions on the afterlife?
Yeah, that one is a tough one. Again, I do go with I believe that God is a more compassionate God than I've definitely been raised with. Uh, to make sense of hell, I really don't know. I can't. I do think it from everything that I've learned and understand about it, it does sound, it is the place that, you know, that is made originally for Satan and the people that follow him from the beginning. Um,
Real quick
but
about
yeah,
that, real quick before you finish, like,
mhm,
did Satan deserve that too? Like, Satan offered a rebellion against God, and his
mhm.
punishment is eternal suffering. Like that, even that seems to be. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead. That
Well, as they say, when you come at the king, you better not
you
miss.
better not miss.
So if you don't take him down, yeah, you're gonna have to be put down. That's what I think it was a pretty big swing that he took. So
Hey,
you're gonna
balls!
get it.
Respect the balls.
So it kind of goes both ways. If you're gonna do that, you're gonna get. He was going for. You know, that's a risk reward type of thing. So, but he was still given. If you think about it, Staten was still given a pretty good gig, kicked out of heaven. Yet he still gets to torture Job. He still gets to be in popular culture. He gets to still get to be perceived pretty cool,
He
and
gets to
he
be a
still
snake for a
goes
little
there
while.
forward. So, how badly was the devil really punished? You know, there's still. I'm saying God is more merciful than people
More,
think.
I'll torture you for eternity, but check this out. You get to torture some poor old man for a couple of years. There you go. That's a good trade
He's
off.
look. I'm saying the devil gets a he gets a pretty good gig. He gets even Milton makes him his own main character, makes him pretty cool. So he didn't get that badly punished, but yeah, I do have a hard time thinking about yeah, I do have a hard time thinking about the God that I believe in sending so many people to hell as we've been raised to in our environment that simply out of especially simply out of ignorance. I have a very hard time with anyone who has absolutely no knowledge of God whatsoever, has no opportunity to learn how to get to heaven whatsoever, would be sent to hell. That I have a very hard time with. Um, but yeah, and yeah, I have a very hard time with that. At the same time, I mean, I also have a hard time with Christians who throw out hell as as almost like a rhetorical argument of saying as not, and anytime it comes up, it should come up with a tear in their eye, not as a, and you know what, you're going to hell, as saying anyone who disagrees with them, and you're going to hell. That I find incredibly distasteful. It shouldn't be something that is used as a comeback
Yeah.
or as a way of proving them right. I'm right because you're going to hell. That's not a debating technique. That's a personal perspective that they have, but it's not going to change the person's mind that you're talking to. Um, yeah,
And it has the, I mean, I was going to say implicit, but the explicit suggestion that I'm going to enjoy the fact that you're in hell since you
yeah,
disagree with me, which
yeah.
is not a new phenomenon. Like if you read, I think it was Tertullian and even it was either Augustine, and Augustine, they wrote that they believed that people in heaven would be able to look down into hell and watch the unbelievers in torment and take pleasure out of it. So like it was there for a very long time.
Right.
Um, the unknown, the people who don't know God thing was, I remember like that really bothered me too. Because I remember going to Dr. Saxon. I remember Dr. Saxon at our college,
Mm-hmm.
and I brought the question to him, and I said, "Okay, so you're telling me that someone who has no knowledge of the gospel, they die and they still go to hell?" And I knew what the answer was going to be. He was going to reference Romans, where Paul says that, the look at the trees argument, that, yeah, you can tell by looking at the world that it has order and someone definitely created it, so they're without excuse. And I said, okay, all right, that's fine. I mean, like, pretty much every culture believes in God, like 90% of them. And so they got that part. But there's no way they could then deduce that, well, the right God is this, triune deity who spoke reality into existence and
Mm-hmm.
came down to Bronze Age Palestine as his own son. And it's as a human sacrifice. Like, there's no way they could figure that out. And
Yeah.
the answer I always got was, well, listen, if they really wanted to know, God would have sent them a missionary. Like God wouldn't leave them hanging like that. And I thought, okay, that doesn't make any sense because Jesus
Yeah.
gives the Great Commission,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, go into all the world and preach the gospel, and doesn't bother to mention that there are two whole continents to these people, like millions of people, and say, oh yeah, by the way, make sure you get there so they can hear the message too. So for 1,500 years, you're telling me not a single person in North and South America had this actual yearning to know the true God, and all of them went to hell? There's no, and then I get answers like, well, you don't know. Someone could have been. It's like, okay, fuck off. You're just making shit up now. Like this is like this is nonsense. It's insane. Uh, and the Satan thing you talked about, the Satan story is interesting to me. So Satan is I think it's a character that's evolved over time. Like, in the book of Job, like we attribute it to Satan, but it's like the Satan. It was a title, which explains why Satan's in heaven in the first place. It's weird, like looking at it through an English translation, like because Satan
Yeah.
just means accuser. And so this angel, who was the accuser, the Satan, told God, hey, if we test this guy, he's going to fail. And it's been attributed to our Satan. And it's also funny that people would always say that, because I'd ask like, well, how come God doesn't show up? Just like show up and say, hey, here I am. I'm Yahweh. I'm Jehovah. I'm the God. I'm the right guy. And they say, well, listen, they had the prophets, they had Jesus and everything. So, if they didn't believe them, they wouldn't believe God showing us. I was like, I don't believe that. Like, I'm pretty sure that if God actually showed up again and not say rely on stories from thousands of years ago, that, we wouldn't buy it. And then they say, well, if God just showed up, then it wouldn't be an act of faith anymore. People wouldn't believe. And I was like, okay, well, wait a minute, but Satan knew God. Like Satan worked with the guy. Like he knew his capabilities, he knew his
Mm-hmm.
power, and he still rebelled. So, like,
Yeah.
why not give us that shot? Like, why only reserve it for angels? And it also calls in the question of the free will. because they say, well, you can't accept God, or you need life to have free will so you can accept God, because if he's here, then your free will goes away. I say, well, when you get to heaven, you can't sin, so your free will is gone anyway. So, like, which one is it? Like, is it free will or is it not? So the Satan story is very fascinating to me. He's like one of my favorite characters in all the Christian canon. Oh, did you freeze?
Yeah. I haven't heard you for a minute.
Oh shit! I'm sorry, you frozen. Okay, is my video coming through fine?
It is now. It was frozen before.
Oh shit! I'm sorry. What's the last thing you heard?
Last thing I heard was it was just about it was we were just getting into Satan. But yeah, but as far as if God, that's a good question that you bring up though. If God showed up today, um, my gut reaction is I don't think people would respond just because of just modern attitudes. We can't agree on anything. Why would we agree on even if God showed up? I mean, I think it would still be divisive. It would still be hashtag not my God.
It
It it
it
would still
it
people would
would
still.
it
I mean,
would
he would perform a miracle, and people would come up with conspiracy theories. It would it would I don't think I don't think at least in the if as far as God showing up in like the traditional senses we're talking about.
yeah.
Um, and I mean there is that argument that they had Jesus and look what they did with him. Uh, so but yeah, I don't think there would be I don't think there would be this great uh, you know change of things, the great fixing of things or unifying of things. I think it would be you know you know as best as I understand Revelations, it would be kind of a mess.
It
So
would. It would. I just don't see how the success rate would be lower. It would have to be higher. And what I point to is that he had no problem doing it in the past. Like when Elijah was competing against other gods, it's like, well, if my God will show up, and God did. God showed up and vaporized all of the sacrifices. It's like, okay, so what makes Elijah and them so special? Like how come we can't do it? It just it's odd to me. Like I don't know. It's just it's weird. But I
yeah,
just don't see how. Hmm?
you're exactly right. That is tough, and that is another thing that is hard to contend with is the Old Testament God, then the New Testament God, and then the God of today. Yeah, that is a tough thing to get your brain around. And I mean, a lot of this stuff I end up going to, stuff that I don't understand, and I just, and there's some stuff I'll just never understand.
Yeah.
Uh, there is there, and part of that I think is a good thing. I mean, it may come off as silly, but, and I'm sure you probably heard this, but I'm glad I don't understand everything that God does, because if I understood, you know, everything about God, why he does it, then he wouldn't necessarily be God,
Mhm.
because if that means I'm on the same level,
Yeah.
so there is that my end of it. Of there are some things I don't understand that I'll never understand, and I'm okay with that.
Um, so I like what you said. This is something that I mean, I didn't come up with it. I stole it from Christopher Hitchens. But the idea that it's a subtle giveaway when people refer to God as a personal God. It's like it actually gives the game away right there, because God is not one thing. God is something different to every individual person. Everyone has their own idea of what who God is and what God's
Mhm.
attributes are. And so yeah, I think, but the thing about not understanding God, this is something I've talked about many times, is that yes, it is 100% correct that if this deity did exist, that holds atoms together and crafted galaxies, this would be a being beyond our possible comprehension. We couldn't begin to fathom what the essence of this being was. And I'm willing to concede that. However, if you do concede that, you can't then turn around and say, I know what this God wants. You can't, because like it's like because how do you know? Like how like this God could be lying to you. This God, it could be another deity pretending to be the God. Like it just like it falls to me, that falls apart pretty quick. And the fact that yes, if God existed, that we wouldn't understand him is something that anyone who believes in any God could say. Like, and so it's like, so I believe in my God, I can't understand him, and that's how I know he's right. And it's like, well, I believe in a different God, and I can't understand him. That's how I know he's right. It's like, I don't know.
Mhm.
So for me with my journey, when I left the faith, for a long time, I was, I guess you could call me a deist or a pantheist or something like that. And because I was a look at the trees guy. I was like, okay, all right, why is there something rather than nothing? How do I explain that? Like I got nothing, and no one does. And things do seem to be more or less in order to allow things to be. So there had to have been some sort of prime mover or divine artificer, some first cause that actually got the ball rolling here. But I didn't believe that this entity answered prayers. I didn't believe this entity had anything waiting for me when I died. Like that this entity would help me find my car keys. Like I didn't think anything like that. But after a while, I got to the point of, okay, hold on. What's the difference between a deity that doesn't interact with me at all, has no plan for me, has nothing like a special purpose, and a deity that doesn't exist? Turns out there's none. And so I kind of realized I was an atheist. Like that's how I got there.
Yeah, 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 and I can understand that. Yeah, for me, and at least as far as my faith goes, I mean, I believe what I believe, but as I told people, I believe what I believe, but I'm not angry about it. Like, I'm not offended by
Yeah.
you. I'm not offended by that people think differently than me. I understand that that's the nature of existence, and people have their choices.
Yeah.
That they get to do that. For myself, I have using the phrase "a personal faith." It is. I found it to be a very great and rewarding thing for myself, um, because uh, life itself is unpredictable. The world is an ever-changing thing. So, for myself personally, it's nice to have something that doesn't change. It's nice to have something consistent.
Hmm.
In the dark nights of the soul, I don't, remind myself of Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein. It's nice to have, a God that you pray uh, to have some type of purpose in life, to have some place to go to
Yeah.
with your concerns, with your anxieties. Um, those are certain things that I think is a human need that science just doesn't do for you. The natural need that you have. Now, some people may call that a crutch, but I would just call that being human. Some people use therapy. I also use therapy. Therapy's great. Um, I think it's all just part of being human. Now, people think differently than I do, and I think that's fine. But that's what I found to be pretty rewarding. I found my version of Christianity isn't going on knocking on people's doors,
Can you
but
believe we used to do that? Can you fucking believe that? I
yeah,
I tell people this, and it's weird to say out loud. I was like, yeah, when I was in eighth grade, like after school on Wednesdays, we'd pop into a van and we go in teams of two. And it's like, hey, you two got this street right here, you two got this street right here. Knock on all these doors, invite
yeah,
people to church. The rendezvous point is here, and I'll pick you up in 45 minutes. Insane that we used to do that.
yes,
I just like, it's wild, man.
yep, yep. We used to do the same thing. We used to do surveys. We used to go in our school used to do like surveys and type of things and go to door that way and try to give them a track or something like that.
Wait, surveys, like how'd that go?
It was kind of like, it was just like, it just like more of like creating a profile type of thing, and then creating the opportunity to, follow up, be like, hey, well, how would you rate, religion in your life? How would you,
Wow.
yeah. it was more like that, and then would you like some information, and not necessarily a confrontational, hey, do you believe in God? This is how you should go. This is how you should go to heaven, type of thing. But kind of opening the door that way. But I mean, we were high schoolers. I didn't really, But again, it still didn't. I don't remember anything actually coming from it.
No.
What I do think is far more effective is, as the old phrase going, you may be the only Bible that anybody reads.
Yeah.
The whole picture of salt and light. I think we're better off being light, and we're too busy being salty. Uh,
Ooh, good.
that's what I think, is because I think there's, and this kind of goes into the political end of it. A lot of Christianity, at least American Christianity, has gotten into the culture war and thinks that's the great battle to fight, and has totally lost the spiritual end of it, the burden for people, the compassionate end of it, that is completely lost. And all that's that so much of it is being angry at the world, being angry about the Super Bowl halftime show, just being angry that public schools don't think the way we do. And it's not, and it's also not biblical. It's just, let's be angry about the world today. And look, it's just, it's going terrible. And we should just all hunker together instead of being concerned about the very people that they are afraid of.
All right. I have like a dozen things to say off of what you mentioned there. That was great. The first I want to get out of my head before I forget is, how crazy is it that can you imagine the perspective of the people who answered the door for us? Like you get a knock on your door and there's a 15-year-old outside saying, "Have you considered going to church?" It's like, what is? It must have been so weird. Like, I'm amazed. It's just, and you guys had doing a survey. Like, get the fuck out of here. What's going on? That's pretty crazy. But the one thing you mentioned about how Christianity, well, American Christianity at least, and the Protestant version of American Christianity, evangelical, is the focus on being separate from the world. And I will say they were right about one thing, and it's something that I noticed pretty early on, that they would always give an example that the church is here and the world is here. And so, we draw our dividing lines, like, this is what we think is right, and this is what the world thinks is right. But 10 years later, it's moved. The world's gone here, and the church is where the world was. That's true. That's 1,000,000% true. And I mean, we've seen it happen over and over and over again. Go back and listen to a standard Christian evangelical sermon in 1958 and tell me what they say. Like, it is like segregation is actually good. And like if Jerry Falwell's like, yeah, this is what we need to do. And women should, hell, we were alive for the women shouldn't wear pants thing. Like, and so like, like people, like, they're right. The world, like the church does follow the world and eventually ends up where they are. And it's true. But I mean, instead of realizing that, oh yeah, this is just nonsense we're holding on to just to stay separate. But Christianity has to do it, because one thing Christianity, I mean, it's a super old religion. So, it's like it adapts. It adapts and evolves to match its culture. And you talked about, actually, I don't remember what the prompt was for this, but I wrote down religious utility. Religious utility. That, you said that, it's good to have a higher purpose and, someone to look up to and to take comfort in.
You bring you have something greater than yourself to bring your anxiety.
Yes. And so I've mentioned that I'm not religious in any sense, but I do understand why religion is so effective and why most people in the world, if not religious, do believe in some deity. I 100% get it. Here's my theory, is that imagine you're a human being living 150,000 years ago, in the African savannah, and you're in a tribe of, 200 people or so. You're related to some of them, to a lot of them, and the other ones you just know. You see them every day, and you know everything about them. And you're pretty confident that your interests converge, that they're not going to screw you over for no reason. And then you run across another tribe. You don't know shit about them. You have no clue. You don't know if they're after your resources. They don't know if you don't know if they're going to come here and kill you and steal the women. Like, you have no idea what's up with these people. There's an automatic, headbutting there. You don't know what's going to happen. You have nothing in common. You're not related to them. But let's say your tribe worships the moon god, and then you run across another tribe, and they're like, "Oh, we also worship the moon god." You guys got a bond right there. You got a bond. Yep. Okay, I can trust you because you worship the moon god just like I do. Yep. And so the people who were around back then, who were more susceptible to religion, had a huge advantage to those who didn't. And honestly, most people probably would, because even today, the world is scary. It was infinitely more scary, in the prehistoric era. Like, people just appeared on the earth, no idea where they came from, no idea where they were going. They only lived like 28 years. They didn't know where how rain happened, an earthquake. No one has any answers at all. And so, a conspiracy theory is better than no theory at all, because it is super uncomfortable to say, a lightning bolt could strike me down any day now and kill me, and I have no idea what lightning is. And and you also know, well, what happens when I die? Like, what happens after that? And so, look, I would have bought it too. I did for a long time, but I don't blame them at all for buying it. And It gets worse as time goes on. Like, some of the things that really upset me, history is full of things that upset you, obviously, but like the ones that upset me the most are when people had scientific knowledge and kept it to themselves to further their religion. And it happened a lot. There was
right, like I think you mentioned this before about basically knowing about the orbiting of the sun.
Yes, that's my favorite example. Yeah, that the Aztecs, they were very good astronomers, and so they could predict, hey, in 3 days at around noon, there's going to be a total solar eclipse. So they would tell everyone in town, and hey, listen, just to show a demonstration of my power, in 3 days, I'm going to blacken out the sun. And sure enough, 3 days came by, sun went dark. If I were in that crowd, I would do anything you told me. Anything. I was like, this guy said he would blacken out the sun blackened out. Like, what else am I supposed to surmise from that? I don't know anything about, orbits or about, shadows of planets and moons and shit. So that really bothered me. There was another example. I can't remember the guy's name, but I think he was a Greek engineer. And he basically invented a primitive version of like a steam engine. And he would use it to make these little like statues of like beetles fly, like these stone statues. He'd make them take off from the ground and fly around the room and land somewhere. And he said, that's a demonstration of God's power. They can make stones move. And people were like, oh, sure, of course, I will do it. And I was like, and he kept that secret to himself, like 1,600 years before the steam engine was invented again. It's like humanity could have progressed so much further if that guy would have just like, oh yeah, let's just get this out to the public. But no, he used it to further his God, which that really bothers me. And you talked about Christianity and how Christianity is whatever you want it to be, like any religion. Like it is. Like every Christian sect and every religious sect has different interpretations about it, which annoys me when people say that, well, they're not true Christians. Fuck you. There's no such thing as a true Christian. It is. Go ahead.
Right. Again, no, but that then it goes to the whole thing of no, not all the different versions of Christianity. Again, I think God I believe in is far less narrow-minded as the people who pretend to have a relationship with God. Because, I mean, if you just, the God of the Bible who came down in human form as Jesus, a far more compassionate individual than a lot of the people that we see today promoting Christianity. The person of Jesus, you wouldn't imagine would be someone who would be, rejoicing in the death of someone who was who is gay, or like, or would be have anything to do with the what is it? I can't remember, Westboro. Anything that the Westboro Baptist Church would be doing.
Mhm.
Far more compassionate person than anyone who'd be judgmental of prostitutes or sex workers.
Yeah, yeah,
Far more compassionate God you find in the New Testament than you find in the world today. Uh, because a lot of that stuff again does go back to, you're talking about the influence of the world, but also sadly enough also falls under personal preference viewpoints.
yeah,
So much of people's Christianity should be personal, but a lot of people's Christianity is shaped by whatever pastor you get. And whatever pastor you get could make you think that having a beard is evil, having sideburns is bad, um, down to what type of car you drive. And that, again, but it all goes to your greater point that unfortunately, religion a lot of the time divides people, and that when it should be unifying people, it depresses people when it should be giving them joy.
yeah, yeah,
And and also, this also comes to another thing is one of the things I've observed is, and this kind of gets to also the political stuff, the things that have bothered me that I've observed, is the double standards and the hypocrisy. There, specifically the Christian rights support of Donald Trump, which I did not see coming at all. He showed
really.
up. He showed up, and I thought it was clear he was a joke. To me, I was like, isn't this clear? No one should be taking this man seriously. I mean, I watched every debate and thought, okay, he's blown it now, right? No one can possibly be voting for this man child, right? He just keeps saying terrible, terrible things. Can't we? Isn't it clear? And what I didn't count on was especially the older generation, their fear of the political left, how much they're afraid of the Democrats being in control, how much they were afraid of the Democrats being in control of the Supreme Court, which only goes to which also, in retrospect, saddens me, because if you're that afraid of the Democratic Party, how small is your God?
Yeah, yeah,
And that you have to compromise everything, everything, everything I was taught as a kid was completely against everything Donald Trump did, said, and embodied. He was rude. He was mean. He was adulterous. He was a liar. And he's the Christian rights champion. Are you kidding me?
yeah. Like enthusiastic champion, by the
Yes.
way. Like
So,
not reluctant, like enthusiastic.
to the point of hilariously over the top memes of like cartoons of like, like Jesus hugging Donald Trump and
Yeah.
stuff like just insane things. I don't, I, that was, yeah, that I didn't see coming, and I found it incredibly appalling. And to see people that I respected see that, make the whole King David
Oh
comparison.
Christ, the King David argument.
When I was like, wait a minute, this guy is awful. He is not on our side. He is just regurgitating Fox News talking points, saying things you want to say, and also saying the quiet part out loud and acting like a child.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyone who believes in the God I was raised with should not be voting for this man ever.
So so I wasn't quite as surprised. I was like I said, I wasn't quite as surprised because Trump reminds me a lot of like a bombastic evangelical preacher. He does. Like in a lot.
I have seen those preachers. I've seen those
Yeah,
preachers.
in a lot of ways, they his mannerisms, his braggadocio, like his over the top, his use of like comedy logic. I call it comedy logic, where like the joke where people say, well, if the black box on an airplane is indestructible, why not make the entire plane of a black box? Like, that's comedy logic. That's what Trump
Right.
uses all the time, and it's like
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense, but people roll with it, but although I wasn't surprised that that the Christian right embraced Trump, like I do think I more or less know that Donald Trump's election and his acceptance, his gleeful acceptance by the evangelical right is the death knell of the evangelical Christian right. Like it's over because like you said, it laid bare everything they were saying they didn't care about at all. Like they
Yeah.
didn't care about like they didn't care about the adultery. They didn't care about the fact that, if a 6-year-old, if you had a 6-year-old that acted like Donald Trump, you would be admonishing that 6-year-old every single day. That
Yes.
the cruelty, like they didn't care about that. It was
Right.
all about getting political victories. And so you're right. The older generation, it makes sense to them. And honestly, listen, from a political standpoint, it's the right move politically. Like because politically, if I have a candidate who backs all the policies that I back and the candidate's a piece of shit, all right, I don't care. Like I need those political policies through. So so politically it does make sense.
Mhm.
But you know, ecclesiastically, it's gonna really hurt them because that everyone saw it, and more importantly, their kids saw it. All of their kids saw that you don't give a shit about what the Bible says. You're only weaponizing it against your political opponents. So how much can I actually trust you?
Yeah. 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 How deep your convictions go when they stop at the ballot box.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That just kills me. But yeah, the double standards don't even stop there because of the other thing that bothered me. Everyone is fairly familiar with, I mean, historically the scandals that have gone on with the Catholic Church, specifically with the abuse of
Hmm.
kids and things like that. That's awful and terrible. What has only come to light really recently and become, at least in you know in the news and in other areas, is uh, how often that has also occurred in fundamental Christian circles as well, in colleges, in churches. How often things like assaults
Yeah.
occur, and they're swept under the rug because of whomever is accused of it. And the gross double standard and hypocrisy of that really sickened me again because it goes to if let's say, and it's usually defending somebody who's like a pastor or something like that, whereas someone like you or I who are let's say in this same situation, going to college, and our major is, instead of majoring in being a Bible, or just if we're like a history major and we do the same thing, it wouldn't be swept under the rug. We'd be kicked out,
Hmm.
and it would be we this action this couldn't be put up with. We can't be. You gotta go. That's awful.
Yeah.
Whereas it's been documented that people have been accused of sexual assault, and they're like, oh yeah, but you don't understand, he's a but the damage it would do to the ministry.
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
that
The
argument is just appalling. It's something that, I mean, that I we also found in recent documentaries that I saw about, I want to say, Hillsong Church,
Mhm.
and I can't remember others, but just the prolific hypocrisy of just doing the same thing the Catholic Church did, of taking this person who did something wrong, and instead of disciplining this person, maybe contacting the correct authorities, just moving them to another location and sweep it under the rug, and everything's fine.
See, that they actually, like the independent fundamentalist Baptists, like we grew up with, they actually have a little more protection than the Catholic Church because it's not a unified body. So they can
Mm.
say, well, hey, it's just that church, or that church was bad, or this individual church was bad. Sure, because they don't need to address the entire culture. That's one thing that I have noticed, because the entire culture is like racked with that shit, but it's not, liturgically linked like the Catholic Church is, and so it didn't take a
Right.
black eye quite as big.
Yeah.
And I meant to bring this up earlier, but you were talking about Jesus and the cruelty, and so I have mixed feelings on Jesus, like which is a statement you don't hear too often, but So on the one hand,
Controversial figure. Well, he was he was controversial at the time, TJ. It's
oh
okay.
yeah, yeah. Son of God, not all that impressive to me, gotta tell you. But so it is. So what's the one thing that's really funny to me? You mentioned this about modern American Christianity. I don't want to lump all Christians into this, but modern American Christianity in particular is how much they worship capitalism. They worship American conservatism, then capitalism, then Yahweh in that order. Like that's how it goes. Like they in the choice between God and Mammon, they've chosen Mammon every time. And which is another reason I knew they would accept Trump, because you grew up around these people. It's like they the the more money you have, the better person you are. God has blessed you. Now, it's not 100% success rate. Sure, there are some bad rich people, but for the most part, if you play by the rules, you do everything right, you will be successful. And Donald Trump has billions of dollars. He must be doing something right. He's smarter and he's better than everybody else. Like what argument do you have against that? But it goes completely contrary to everything Jesus said about money. Like Jesus spent his entire ministry incessantly, constantly shitting on rich people. You cannot find one nice thing Jesus said about rich people in the entire Gospels. You can't find it. And there's a and they try to hide it. And it took me a while to figure this out. But so when you were a kid, did you ever hear about the camel through the eye of the needle thing when you were a kid? Yeah. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Jesus says that it is more difficult for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, it is impossible for a camel to get through the eye of a needle. Not going to happen. So what they told us, they told me this when I was like 10 or 11 years old, that the eye of the needle, it's not an actual needle. That's impossible. It's like this really short gate in Jerusalem that's like 3 or 4 feet tall. So it's really hard to squeeze a camel through there. It's possible, but it's kind of hard. Turns out, complete bullshit. Absolutely made up. Like it is just completely made up. The eye of the needle thing does not exist. They made it up out of whole cloth to say that, well, actually, rich people can get into heaven. And then another thing that they would say, the rich young ruler. This one I thought about in college. So there's a story in the Gospels where a rich young ruler comes to Jesus and he says, Rabbi, what must I do to, enter the kingdom of heaven? Right. And he says, love the Lord with all your heart. And he says, well, I've done that since I was a child. He says, okay, you also have to love your neighbor as yourself. He says, I've done that too. Jesus says, follow the commandments. I've done that too. He's like, great. One more thing. I need you to sell all of your shit and give the money to the poor and then follow me. And then you're good. And then the rich young ruler turned away and he walked and he didn't do it. And so what's taught is that, well, listen, he didn't like selling your shit and giving it to the poor isn't like a necessary part of Christianity. This is just a lesson showing that he loved his money more than Jesus. And it's like, well, that's weird because everyone else that followed Jesus in the Bible did exactly that. So if you're telling me why is it unique for him? Like that was a prerequisite. You actually had to sell your shit. And there's another story where there's a widow who goes to the synagogue or the temple. I don't know if the temple's still around at the time. Synagogue, and she throws in 2 pennies into the offering plate, and there's all these rich guys just dumping buckets of gold and silver into there. And Jesus tells his disciples that woman is given more than all of these rich guys. And like, what are you talking about? It's like, because that represents a greater portion of her income than the rich people. So yeah, it's like Jesus never had anything nice to say about rich guys, but talk to any like right-wing conservative fundamentalists. They worship the ground the rich walk on, and they pretend they don't, but they do, and it's entirely antithetical to everything Jesus said.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And to further demonstrate your point, if you think of all the disciples, they left all of their careers to follow him.
Yep.
So the principle again is also grossly is myth if you don't take him for basically both points of saying yes, he literally wanted him to do that, and also the point is also demonstrated.
Yes.
where I think that I think a lot of the worship of capitalism from the Christian right comes from, and this comes from at least the generation that I was influenced by. A lot of it comes from the 80s, from the Reagan era and previously. This great fear of communism,
Yeah.
godless communism, and therefore the result is embrace capitalism, because if you're embracing capitalism, you're embracing. Therefore, by default, by embracing capitalism, you're embracing God, which is not the case
Very
at all.
weird. Very weird. Yeah. Very, very weird.
Not even close. Especially if you worship the God I was raised in.
Mhm.
Last time I checked, the love of money is what?
Yeah, right. It's the root of all evil. And it's like, well, come
Right.
on, it's right there. It's
Which is also capitalism.
yeah, yeah. It's a necessary component of it.
So yeah, yeah, I am I am amazed at, yeah, the worship of rich people. I have observed. You are correct. Also, there is this wing of the prosperity gospel,
Yeah.
of that if you're in good with God, if good in the, you see that if good things happen to you, which is simply not true.
Mhm.
Uh, and I mean, just look at Job, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Demonstrates that the prosperity gospel is not true. If he didn't give up on God. He was on the path he was supposed to be on, and yet he lost everything. The prosperity gospel people would say that he's clearly got something wrong with him.
Well, that's what his friend said. That's what all Job's
Yeah,
friends said. Well, dude, you
yes,
fucked up,
yes,
obviously. God wouldn't do
right,
this to you on a bet. That wouldn't happen.
right,
That's insane. My
right.
favorite part, well, there's my two favorite parts of the story of Job is that Job has, I think we can all agree, a legitimate gripe with the man upstairs. Like, but whoa, what the fuck? What did I do? Like, I
And he never gets an answer.
never got an answer. God does show up and he says, "Who the hell do you think you are?" Like, he's like, "I am
Right.
capital G God, and I don't have to answer to you and everything." And my second favorite part was that at the end of the story, Job ends up getting his riches back. He gets, like, double his cattle and his land and
Yeah.
shit, and a new wife and new kids. I was like, okay, his kids are still dead though. Like, who cares if he
He's
got
gonna
new
have to
kids?
mourn those dead
Yeah,
kids.
God didn't resurrect the kids that he killed. He's like, here's some new kids. It's pretty much the same. That's my favorite parts of the story. It's so weird. I want to mention too, why I didn't say why I had mixed feelings about Jesus. I was talking about the positive ones, but Jesus also says some pretty fucked up shit too. Like he did. Like, you don't have any mention, like in the Old Testament, like Jewish people don't believe in hell, like the
Right.
Christians do. Like it's Sheol, it's a soul sleep. And it's not until gentle Jesus, meek and mild comes along that you get the idea of eternal suffering and torment. Like that's when so Jesus brings up, like, oh, that's kind of weird. And there's a story in the Gospels when a Samaritan woman comes up to Jesus, and so for those you know, the Samaritans were a different ethnic group than the Jewish people. They lived to the north of Judea, and they didn't get along. Like they both considered themselves descendants of Jacob, but they didn't like each other. And so she came up to him and she's like, "Hey, I think she said like her kid, like her kid was sick or something like that. I can't remember what her issue was, but Jesus told her, listen, bitch." It's like, it is not
He's the PJ
proper.
version of the Bible, everybody.
He said, I mean, he said, "It is not proper for me to take the food from my children and feed it to the dogs." Like, that's what he said to her. And which is why I added the bitch part, because it fits right in. And then she says, "Well, yes, that's true, but the dogs do get the scraps that fall from the children's table." And Jesus thought that was clever, and so he went up and helped. It's like, okay, so Jesus was racist until she said something funny. Like, that's what that story is telling me right there. So yeah, it's kind of weird, but most of the stuff about I read about Jesus, like, oh yeah, I think it's pretty cool, and I don't think modern Christianity is in any way indicative, like of what Jesus represented. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows with for the Son of Man to me either.
Right. I mean, in that case, I mean, we'd have, we quibble. From my perspective, it is, I would go with the traditional, her. It is him basically giving her an opportunity to express her faith. But yes, it's a rough way to go about it.
Right? Yeah, come on.
It's a rough way to go about it. Um,
Your
uh,
people are not deserving of my message is a weird
right,
opener.
right, right. But I do think that yeah, I think it kind of does though speak to the woman's faith that she would go that I think it does go to show how she viewed Jesus as being the source of the solution to her problem, to forego the cultural problems of the day,
Mhm.
which would be a great note for modern Christianity that is so invested in the culture war of today, that that's their gospel, that they are so afraid of public schools. They are so afraid of anyone who thinks differently than they do, um, that consumes their gospel, instead of being concerned of the very people that they're afraid of.
Yeah, that was, the hardest realization for me was when I finally understood that the the fundamentalist religious cult that we grew up in is not about love. It's about hate. It's about hating gay people. It's about hating trans people. It's about hating liberal people. So let's be real, it's about hating black people. It's about hating taxes. I mean, it's about hating universities and hating professors. And it's like that's it. Like that's the core,
Right.
like the core message is about that. And one good way I saw this speech that Trump gave years ago, and Trump is on. He's talking to a Christian audience, and he's talking about lowering taxes and strong defense. Tepid applause. But then he mentioned something about and we got to keep the Muslims out, and they go fucking wild, just nuts, and
Right.
just
Right.
lose their minds. And so when you see like the galvanizing issues, it's always and it's like for example, like for black people, I always mention it's like I love bringing up the fact that when Christians say that, well, conservative Christians at least, they'll say that, the country's falling apart because, all these people have neglected God. And that's why they're voting for Democrats. And I was like, the group of people, like the group of people, the group of people with the highest church attendance in the United States, it's black women. Like
Mhm.
90% of black women or 88% of black women attend church on a day, way higher than everybody else. Guess who has
Yep.
the highest percentage of a vote for the Democrats? It's black women. And I
Yep.
brought this up to a friend of mine. We went to college together, and I told her this, and she's like, "Oh, that's weird because the Bible coincides with conservative beliefs." And it's like, yeah, do you hear yourself? Like, apparently it doesn't, because like the group that's the most Christian is the group that votes against Republicans the most,
Yeah.
and it's like they've combined. And I talk about the black community is that. So I mentioned like Jerry Falwell. Like Jerry Falwell did a whole sermon about segregation and how it was good. And Bob Jones University, I can't remember when it was founded, like in the 50s or something, didn't allow black students to attend. They finally allowed black students to attend, I think, in 1971, but they had to be married black students, and they
Uh,
wouldn't allow single black students.
no,
And
no,
then,
you can't allow the single ones in.
right, yeah, oh my God, like the damage
What'll
that would cause.
happen? Oh no, they
Yeah,
might.
the
They
damage that
might
would.
date. They might date
It's
the
like,
white
I know,
women,
right? It's
which they
and
made sure was a rule.
yeah, and then a couple years later, they were forced to allow single black people to attend. And then there was the huge blow up, like in 2000, when it was either Bush or McCain went to Bob Jones University, and this became like a national issue. Like, are you shitting
No.
me? It's the year 2000, and this school still is like had on the not like an unwritten rule. It was a written rule that interracial dating was not allowed. And they're like, that is fucking wild. And I remember bringing this up in college, and one of my teachers, my English teacher, like, oh, everyone thinks Bob Jones is that racist school. I was like, all right, it is. Like, well, what are we doing here? And
No.
then I had a guy went to one of my classmates said that, well, listen, I don't think it's racist because it doesn't, it goes both ways. It's not that just like black students can't date white students. it also affects white students. They can't date black students either. And so, okay, here's the timeline. Here's how it went. The school was founded. We don't want black people can't attend. And then they said, okay, you can attend, but only if you're married. And then, okay, you can attend if you're single, but you can't date any of us. And now it's you can attend, you can date us, but only with parental consent. How are you going to look me in the eye and tell me that's not racist? And like the conservative Christian evangelical movement, I always ask them, when is the last time that the Christian right has stood in solidarity with an issue that the black community finds to be very important, that they support? Like, when is it there? Like, they weren't there for the Voting Rights Act. They weren't there for poverty and welfare. They weren't there for affirmative action. They weren't there for BLM. So, like, what do you think is going to happen here? And they still like, no, wait, God, I don't know what's on. And what really cracks me up is that they acknowledge that, okay, yeah, sure, the slavery and the Jim Crow stuff, that was bad, we all know, but that's all over now. Racism was solved in 1964. It all magically evaporated that day, and everyone's had an equal shot for the last 60 years. It's just a weird coincidence that the group that was enslaved for 400 years, it happens to be the poorest one. Like, it's just weird. I guess they need to get their act together. Like, that's things like, they have to know this. Like, they know it, and they just keep denying it.
Yeah. There's and I think there is they threw it on Bob Jones, but I think conservative Christianity has been, like saying the quiet part out loud. I think they have been. I think Bob Jones probably represented a sector that did have that kind of rule, if not on the books.
Yeah.
I think that mentality was definitely.
Definitely was.
It definitely around than more than just one institution.
Yeah, they were just dumb enough to have it written in black and white. Like that. Yeah. That's the difference.
Right, yeah, that was really the only difference. But yeah, a lot of the circles, at least, a lot of the areas that I'm familiar with, that type of mindset, I think was definitely present. Don't necessarily.
Sorry, go ahead.
That was.
Oh, when I was in college at Maranatha, I was dating a white girl, and her dad was a member of the staff, and he didn't like that. Like, he didn't. And he said that, listen, I'm not against, interracial dating or anything. I'm just afraid that if you guys get married, other people are going to have a problem with it, and that's going to, prevent you from a lot of service opportunities in church. Like that was his logic. And I actually went and talked to our university president about it. I don't remember like why I went to him. Who knows? Like, maybe, but he said that, yeah, I think that's messed up that he said that and everything. There's a lot of people with a lot of backwards opinions, and like he said that, there's some Christians out there who don't believe black people have souls. He's like, I think they do. I was like, you think they do? Like, what? I will never forget that. It was like, I think they do. It was like, what the fuck is going on here? And it's just like, it was.
Yeah, that's not a matter of thought or debate.
Right? Yeah. It's just like, it's
I just want you to know, I think you do.
You just so you know, like, if I were a betting man, I would and the pastor of my home church refused to do interracial marriages. He wouldn't do them. And I remember, like, my family, we went and talked to him about this and everything, because it was like a white guy. He was marrying a Native American girl, and it was like a really big deal. Like, it was an issue. And the pastor, and maybe he ended up doing the marriage, but like under protest, which is like, why would you get married under this guy? But he said, he's like, well, I just think this. And so I started asking like more questions and everything about like the civil rights movement and everything like that, and just black culture in general, which is sorely lacking in that sect of Christianity. And my dad brought something up. He says, I hear you talk about history all the time. I've never once heard you mention Martin Luther King. Like, it's never happened. Like, you never. Oh, also, one of the schools I went to when I was in 6th grade did not recognize Martin Luther King Day, which was pretty common back in the 90s for Christian churches. Like, schools, it was not an uncommon thing. People would people would say that, well, Martin Luther King was a communist, and I would get really upset about that. Now I look back like, yeah, he was. It's like, fuck yeah, he was. Yeah, who cares? But but that was a
He was
very common.
he was also a once in a forever type of leader that we should probably recognize.
Well, but he was a huge liberal, and that goes against everything that they stand for. And so my dad asked, he's like, "Hey, how come you don't mention Martin Luther King at all?" And my pastor said, "Well, Martin Luther King was an apostate. Like, he didn't believe in the virgin birth. He publicly stated that. He had a lot of opinions about a biblical literalism that I don't agree with. So I don't think it'd be appropriate to reference him." And I said, "Hold on. It's funny you mentioned the Jefferson thing, because that's what I brought up." And I was like, Thomas Jefferson was a deist. Thomas Jefferson believed less about the Bible than Martin Luther King did. And like, he wrote, he edited an entire Bible to take the supernatural stuff out. I've definitely heard you mention Thomas Jefferson. And his response was, "Well, Thomas Jefferson wasn't an ordained preacher, so that doesn't count." This was very, very common, and like, this was a feature, not a bug. Still is, honestly. Like, and it goes pretty deep. Like, the virulent hatred of a Black culture was incredibly powerful. I remember I recognized this pretty early on. Like, I wasn't oblivious to this. I recognized it, by my late teens easily. And the way I looked at it was, okay, just because these people, are pretty racist, that doesn't mean the Bible's incorrect. That doesn't mean that God isn't real. So I never let that affect, like, my interpretation, my relationship with God Almighty. I remember when I was in college, I was walking back to the dorm with a guy that, like, he was like a B-level friend, like, not someone I hung out with a lot, but someone that was in my friend group. And I remember him saying, "TJ, you are a credit to your race." Like, those words came out of his mouth. And I was just like, this kind of shit happens all the time. And Republicans wonder, is like, God, I can't understand why Black people aren't supporting us. It's because, it's because of this shit that's been going on for decades, and there's still remnants of it today.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Stuff like that is crazy, because so often it is the right that accuses the left of bringing up race all the time, when clearly the right hasn't gotten over it.
No, it's more important to the right. So this is an example. I don't know if you heard me say it. I bring this up all the time. Is that the right likes to accuse the left of practicing identity politics. And my first response is, yes, they do, because all politics are identity politics. Like, ever, there is no such thing as non-identity politics. Like, whatever the identity is, like, whether it's someone who supports certain fiscal policy, someone who is pro or against wars, like, that's your identity. But even if we're going to talk about what they actually mean, which is like racial identity politics, so if you listen, I am not shitting you. Like, if you look at the demographic map of people who vote for the Democratic Party, it is uncanny. It is like exactly what the demographics of the United States is. Like, I couldn't believe how close it was. Like, the United States of America is 59% white, Democratic Party 59% white. The United States is like 12% Black, Democratic Party like 14% Black. It's like 15% Hispanic United States, 15% Hispanic Democrat. It is crazy accurate. Go over to the Republican Party, 85% white, 85%. So listen, like, what I always say is this: like, imagine there was a political party out there whose voting base was 85% Black. What would you say about that party? You would say, this is the Black People's Party. This is a party who has the interest of Black people in mind above everything else, and you'd be right. And it's like, but for some reason, like all Republican policies are crafted to one type of person, a white conservative Christian, to the extent that they are wildly overrepresented in the party with pretty much no minorities. And they don't consider that identity politics. Like, yeah, that's precisely what it is. And so that's why it's hilarious to me that they say that, oh, it's the left that does identity politics. No, you guys do it way more.
Right. Yeah, no, they do. And there's a good reason for why the Republican Party is not as diverse as it should be. One of those things being is that I don't know what the Republican Party is for. I know what they're against. I They don't have any type of at least when it comes to what they could do to probably appeal to younger voters, is compassion. So the thing about the political left, rightly or wrongly, at least present themselves as people who are looking to help people. You may disagree with their methods, but at least they present a problem and a solution. And the Republican Party, especially today, all they do is just say no, 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 and they have no alternatives. All they propagate is no, 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 you can't do that. Let's just secure what we have, and let's not actually help anyone. There's a gross lack of compassion. Also responsible governance. This is the same party who used to pretend to be conservative, used to pretend to care about things like the national debt, used to care about the budget. Whereas now, I mean, two past Republican presidents that we have spent so much, these supposed conservatives, and with that spending, who have they helped? Who have
Yeah.
they in this great Christian Republican Party? Who have they, who have they helped? Whereas, the great definition of religion from the book of James is helping the fatherless and the widows. That's supposed to be the religion that the Republican Party follows, but they don't. There's a gross lack of compassion.
Yeah. I am I'm enamored at when I look at the Republican Party, and I asked, I was like, "What's you guys' plan here? Like, what's the goal? Like, what's your plan for success?" Because you mentioned like for the youth vote and compassion, but what the Republican Party does is actually worse than what you said. It's worse than like they just will ignore you. They actively go out of their way to shit on young people at
Yes.
every possible opportunity. It's like
Yeah.
you're lazy, you're entitled, you're
Hmm.
stupid. Like it's like you probably shouldn't have the right to vote until you're a little bit older. It's like, okay, you think that's going to attract people to your
Hmm.
side? Like the Republican Party is already disproportionately old. Like the older generation votes Republican way more than younger generation. And listen, if you're familiar with how linear time works, that is not working out in your favor. Like it is going to collapse pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's just wild to me that they do that. And I love that you brought up the taxing and spending, or the taxation, and like who were helping with this. There
Yeah.
was I can't remember this lady's name, but she was talking to Senator John Kennedy. For those of you who don't know who Senator John Kennedy, he's a senator from, God, it's Louisiana, I think. I think he's from Louisiana, and I call him Senator Foghorn Leghorn because
He
he
does.
sounds he's the guy that's like,
Well,
yeah,
uh,
yeah. He's the guy from the ad that says, if you hate the police, next time you're in trouble, call a crackhead. It's that guy.
that's
And he was talking about he was talking with some lady, some committee, and she wanted to expand, the child tax credit, to give people with kids more money to help raise their kids. And he was saying how, this would be, harmful to the budget, and we can't afford this. And she brought up an amazing point. You know what point's good? When like it bothers you that you didn't think of it. Like I love those. It's like it really bothers me that I didn't come up with this. But she said, listen, we enacted the Bush tax cuts, some 15 years ago. Then like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we enacted, another like $1.5 trillion for the Trump tax cuts. We have been doing tax cuts for rich people for 20 years. I mean, 40 years really, but like 20 years in recent history. And what have we got to show for it? We still
right.
have child poverty. We still have crime. We still have the same issues and worse than we did before the tax credit. So she said, I wish she said fucking, like, I would fucking love if we would give 20 years of child tax credits and see how that works out. Like we've tried it your way and it ain't working. shut him up. I mean, what could you do to respond to that? Like, it was over. He was like, well, I appreciate your opinion, but we're going to move on. It was just, it's like the cruelty that they just, and the gleeful cruelty too. Like, that's the part that's really amazing to me, that it's not so much about getting what you want. This is why Trump is so successful, is that Trump, I love seeing memes when Trump was president, when it shows someone living in like this ramshackle, like 1840s style house that's falling apart, and they're like, all right, the stock market's up by 40 points. It's like, okay, who the fuck cares? Your life is still shit. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. But like, Trump's doing a good job. It's like, but it's just like, hey, he's the business guy, so he must know what he's doing. And it's all about shitting on your opponents too. One of my favorite things, it's a little dated now, so it doesn't work quite as well. But I don't know if you remember when Obama was president, conservatives always complained about his executive orders. They were like, King Obama issuing out another executive order. He's bypassing Congress. He's just throwing executive orders out left and right. So I heard this on the news every day. I heard it all the time. So I assumed it was true. So I went and actually looked it up. I looked up how many executive orders Obama had done compared to other presidents. And so it turns out that Obama averaged fewer executive orders than any president since the 70s. The 1870s. You have to go back to Grover Cleveland before you find a president who issued fewer executive orders per year than Barack Obama. But that was like a strong talking point amongst conservatives for years. It's like, and then of course Trump gets out, and Trump averaged more executive orders than Obama. It's like they don't care about the shit. Like, they just want to dunk on their opponents by any means necessary. And you're right. It's like, well, what do you stand for? What do you stand for? Like the whole foundation of it, outside of the culture war shit, is economic policy, and which boils down to, hey, the richest guy in town, how about we give him some more money? I'm sure he'll be responsible with it and help everybody out. Like, that's what it boils down to, and it's crazy to see.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy to see, again, the lack of compassion. The other thing they should do is just completely drop out of the culture war, because they're losing.
Yeah, it is funny though. They can't though. They can't. Right. That's all they got.
because they've lost at least the cultural conversation, and they've lost the youth in that conversation. They also the dog has caught the car when it comes to the Supreme Court, because they overturned Roe v. Wade, and guess what? Nobody likes it.
Did you think they were going to do that? Because I didn't. I remember making fun of people saying, like, they're never going to overturn Roe v. Wade. That would be political suicide. I didn't think they would actually do it.
I didn't. I actually thought the judges would actually be judges. I thought that they would actually see the law for what it is, that they would go with the law, and based on past precedent, that they couldn't do that.
Ooh.
But yeah, I didn't think that's where we would be. It was mind blowing. But that they would. So one thing, they've caught the car, and now it's only backfired on them politically.
Huge.
So and the rest of the conversation of the culture war, they are losing, and specifically losing the young. The last thing that they could do to appeal to the youth, and really to everyone, when it comes to basically having an actual solution on how to own a home in America. Go ahead. The whole American dream thing isn't a dream anymore. Mm. It's a myth of a bygone era.
Yeah.
And we're working ourselves to death.
Yeah.
When you used to, at least in theory, or possibly, if you had a full-time job, you could own a home and you could have a family. Now, two adults working full-time are just barely getting by in apartments and things. Mm-hmm. Apartments are skyrocketing.
Yep.
Home ownership is skyrocketing. And what are Republicans doing to offer everyday Americans who are just trying to put a roof over their head. Nothing. Now the Democrats have tried. They've tried things that have blown up in their faces as well. And but at least they have tried. They've tried an error. They've tried and if anyone's watched The Big Short, uh, things have blown up in their faces. But at least they've offered possible solutions.
Yeah, I was about to say the Democrats like aren't a lot better in that category either. Like they're not. Like there's like like it's not like it became easier to buy homes when Democrats are in charge. Like that didn't happen either. Yeah.
It got much worse,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
especially early to mid 2000s. Much worse.
Yeah, yeah. And this is something that I say all the time. So I I talk about the problems with American society and like the culture war thing. The Republicans can't get rid of it. They can't because, like I said, if they got rid of all the culture war shit, what do you have? It's
They'd
like
right. They'd have to be a party of substance.
yeah, well,
They have responsible governance. They'd have to be. They'd actually have to be conservative, which they can't be anymore because they abandoned that years ago.
well, I mean, they could still be economic conservatives. Like they could be economic conservative, national security conservatives, but that's not going to get you too far because like your average American like half of Americans make less than I think $37,000 a year, and if your whole policy is Jeff Bezos shouldn't pay taxes, that's not going to work. But the culture war stuff does work. It's working less and less because they can scare people, and it's like, hey, you know what, there's a man in a dress talking to your child at school. Aren't you terrified? That does galvanize a certain portion of the population. Yeah. But they drop all that shit and it's gone. I say a lot too that the racism is also a big part, and that like if like the Black community, honestly, like every minority group votes majority Democrat, every single one, like Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, Jewish Americans, Native American, every single one of them. But a lot of those communities are really conservative too. And so if they just drop the racism, they could get a lot of those votes, but they're not going to because it's like it's baked into the cake. But one thing I say a lot too is that like if I were to run for office as a Democrat, or at least or whatever, not a Republican, but if I were to run for office, I would make my entire campaign on exactly what you said. I would make it about family values. And I would say, listen, 60 years ago, your average white person could graduate from high school,
right. The white American dream.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very important to clarify that. But could graduate from high school, go out and get a job anywhere, like any job, working as a machinist, a landscaper, a mason, any job, like with no college education. And that one guy could buy a house and support a family of 4 with his spouse staying at home, and did that for his entire life. That is impossible today. Absolutely impossible. And so I'm pretending I'm against my conservative opponent. I was like, what policies is my opponent offering to you that would allow you to spend more time with your kids? Because from what I can tell, the conservative movement, their entire policy is work more. Like you need to work even harder if you want to succeed. You and your spouse are gonna go to work just to afford to live. If you happen to make enough money to afford a child, which is not a given because children are very expensive, that kid is going to be in school all day. They'll get home at 4. You get home at 7. The kid's in bed an hour later. And next thing you know, that kid's 18 and you spent no time with your kid at all. 0. And that's the life you have to look forward to. And that's like, so I'm going to focus on policies that increase wages. I make unions stronger, increase wages so people can you can support a home on one income. I want to guaranteed maternal and paternal leave. Like we say, families are important, but when they have a kid, hey, you're shit out of luck. In Mississippi, the governor of Mississippi, I remember making a statement once because they had done some abortion ban or something like that. and they said, well, listen, a lot of these women who are getting abortions, they're really poor and they can't afford to have a kid, but now you're forcing them to have a kid. What's your plan here? And his plan was, well, listen, we're going to work with local communities to create jobs for these women. It's like, so basically you're saying, congrats on the baby, get your ass back to work. Like, every policy that you have is there to make your boss's life better and make them more money, and take you away from your kids. Like that, you don't even have to like go deep into like the Marxism shit. Like, you just like, hey, I want families to be strong, because right now people shit on young people for being selfish and they're not starting families. They can't fucking do it. And it's like, there's like, I don't know if you've seen this like with manosphere folks when they talk about, oh, women don't want to be stay-at-home moms anymore. Like they want to be out there working. It's like, listen, if a woman has a baby and she's given the option to like go back to work or stay home and take care of the baby, she would probably take the deal of staying home with the baby. Hell, a lot of men would take that deal too, but she can't afford to. Like that's the problem. Not I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And then it's not an indictment on them.
No,
it's reality.
exactly.
And what surprises me is how much again, and this kind of goes to both religion and mostly politics, and how certain realities are apparent and some aren't. Because I found, at least in the trend of people that, at least in a way that I grew up, the folks politically, in the manner in which I grew up, stayed politically to the right. And most of the time, it being invested in the culture war, I found that they were amazing. They were shaped by 9/11, specifically people of my age.
Yeah.
And also a great fear of the left, the fear of public schools, and also the big one being abortion. And so those political leanings, I see to be persistent, and that very same mentality of we'll just work harder.
Yep.
Is being espoused by the same people who are dealing with the same realities that we're talking about, but not seeing, not recognizing them, not acknowledging.
Why do you think
Just
that is? Because that's a good point. A lot of these people are living this hellscape, and they're still sticking to the orthodoxy of like, well, man, I guess I need to put my nose to the grindstone. I know there's no way I'm going to save enough for retirement, but I still got to keep working. Like they know this isn't going to work, but they still stick to it. Like, why do you think that is?
I don't know. I'm not sure why that is, but I have seen a lot of them are the ones who have families, and are the ones that have that mindset. And yeah, I think oddly enough, that's the religion that they've stuck to, as opposed to the religion that they've grown up with. Whereas religiously, I've seen a lot of them have turned away from actual Christianity, aren't as religious as they used to be, or in some cases have converted to different religions altogether. Overall, I'd say a less religious organization, a less religious people, but oddly enough, their religion is being on the right, which is, I find to be very odd.
Yo, I feel so validated that you said this, because I've said this too. I've noticed this exact trend that I realized I was an atheist probably like, I don't know, 2008 or something, but I didn't tell anybody. I told the girl I was dating because we were getting really serious and like ring shopping and stuff, and she was still of Christian. And I know the rules, thou shalt not be unequally yoked. And I was like, well, I can't lie to her for 50 years. I have to let her know the truth. And so, we broke it off and everything. But she's the only person I told. And I kept getting into relationships, but my archetype had already been set. Like, I was a Christian girl, and plus, like, good luck finding an atheist girl out there. As I say, there's not a lot of them, And so I kept dating like these Christian girls in the same background stuff, and then the religion thing come up, and we break up, and it kept happening. And I finally had to tell my folks, like, what's going on here? But ever since then, I've been fascinated to watch everyone else's evolution and seeing how this takes place. And so for a while, I was a really bitter, angry atheist. I don't know if you remember me back in those days, but I was a real asshole. And I was like, going out of my way to insult religious people and Christians in particular. I've gotten over that, but over the years, I've had a lot of correspondence with people that I knew, and they would say, listen, a lot of stuff you say makes a lot of sense. And I'm also thinking of leaving the faith, or I've already left the faith and everything. And when I left the faith, I realized that a lot of my political views were directly tied to my religious views. Like they just, so when I lost the religious views, I was like, oh, I can evaluate this more critically now. And I say this all the time. Like, people who didn't grow up religious, they don't believe me. So I'm glad you say this, that I have had way more success, like getting people away from Christianity than getting them away from conservatism. Like, the conservatism means a lot more, and those just
Yeah.
fucking wild to me. Which
Yeah.
lays bare to what you were kind of talking about, that what they actually worship is right wing American conservatism, not necessarily the Bible.
Right, and it's pretty, and that blows my mind, as at least for myself,
Right?
being kind of the opposite, where I find myself, especially at this age of my life, I found my faith to be incredibly important, whereas I've found politics, especially right wing politics, to be less and less important, and also in some cases, right wing politics to be amazingly short sighted, at the very least. To generously say, right wing politics, amazingly short sighted, when it comes to actually, making an impact in people's lives for a positive reason. Um, it baffles me that people would drop religion and hold on to politics. I mean, just in general, when we talk about all this stuff about heaven and hell and everything, I would think practically, you have insurance. Think about this. You have insurance for your car. You
Yeah.
have insurance for your house, but you do not have insurance for your soul. You
Yeah.
do not know what's going to happen to you when you die. You don't know that for sure. Whatever religion, whatever you believe in, you should probably figure that out for 100% for yourself, whatever the case may be, because you're going to die one day. And you know what? Newt Gingrich is not going to save your soul.
Hey, it's like,
Bill O'Reilly is not going to be there to usher you into the pearly gates.
yeah. Like the words of William F. Buckley Jr. are going to do you no good on your deathbed. Like
Right.
I said, and listen, man, that is by far the most depressing aspect of this. As for my journey has gone on, is that I realized that all these people who say that they're Christian, well, not all these people, a lot of these people who say that they're Christians, and they just don't take it seriously. They don't know shit about what's in the Bible. No clue at all. And like, I'll have conversations with them. They're like, "Oh, well, I didn't know that." Or, "Are you sure about it?" I was like, listen, he's your God. I mean, like, do him the honor of knowing what the fuck he said. Like, I should know this better than you do. And it's like, it is, I'm insulted for you. Like, I will, like, it is insane to me that something that important, like you're saying, that there's this book that has all the answers. Like, it is God's word to man. It has everything you need to know in there, and you just casually know about it because of your culture. It's really sad to me. It is really sad. I don't know how to properly express like my disappointment in these conversations I have with people that just don't seem to know what their purported religion believes.
Yeah, that is sad. And I'll admit, I mean, I've read the Bible. Do I understand everything that's in it? No. Um, but I have found that my faith is a lot better when I actually read the Bible, when I actually at least take the time to do that on a daily basis. I feel a whole lot better than when I don't. It definitely it definitely helps, as opposed to the, again, like you're saying, I use the phrase casual Christianity, using that as a label.
Yeah.
But the thing that they what is the thing that they daily consume? They probably daily consume the news.
Oh yeah. They're not reading the Bible every day. That's not
No,
happening. Like that.
no.
Ask them to tell you one thing about the book of Joel. Blanks it gone. One of my favorite things to do is whenever people would talk. So what people really are married to is not necessarily Christianity, because to be, and like we said, Christianity can be whatever you want it to be. I understand that there's
Right.
there's hundreds of different versions of it, but they're married to like the symbolism and the iconography of Christianity, and like that's what they're really
Yeah.
tied to, which is why like the Ten Commandments debate comes up all the time. Like when I was like working as an intern for the State House in Indiana a couple years ago, I remember them talking about like having the they wanted the Ten Commandments in every classroom or something like that. And whenever people bring that up, I always have the same question every time. It's like, what's the first commandment? I always ask them that. What is it? Tell me right now. Tell me what the first commandment is. 90% of the time, they have no idea. And another one I would ask is, no, actually, I do it backwards. I was like, what are the Ten Commandments? Can you tell me what they are? Can you list them right here? Because I know them. Do you know them? And of course they don't. Okay, just give me the first one. They don't know the first one. It's like, you guys have no idea what the Ten Commandments say. And
Right.
and you're saying it's the foundation of our legal code when like only like three of them are laws. And so it's like it's just like,
Right.
but they're married to the symbolism, and that's and I do get the symbolism because like go back to what we talked like 30 minutes ago about how religion bonds people. During the French Revolution, Robespierre got rid of the clergy altogether, which like the clergy was corrupt as hell. Good move, honestly. They needed to go, but they do you notice they tried replacing all of like the religious aspects of society and secularizing them? Like they got rid of the 7-day week because that came from the Bible, and they made a 10-day week. And I think that's when we started using the metric system, which that stuck around, but the 10-day week did not. But they got rid of Catholicism altogether. But
Hmm.
Robespierre realized what we just talked about, that there is a lot of meaning and purpose, and most importantly, unity and cohesion in people practicing the same faith. So
Yeah.
he tried replacing Christianity with something. It was called the cult of the supreme being, is what it was. And he just made up. He just made it up, and like he had this goofy ass statue, and like he had all these like these meetings parading it around, and people just dunked on it for years about how ridiculous this shit was. And but he was like he was right that, you know, like destroying the church. This is one thing like you mentioned. It was like one thing that non-believers can't replicate, because at least not as effectively, because like I'm an atheist, but I meet another atheist, we may not have anything in common. Like the fact that we don't believe in God is not a bonding mechanism. Like, you know,
Right.
we don't believe in werewolves either. That doesn't mean that we anything for us. And so like without that bonding element, something needs to replace it. And it's hard. Like it's like I haven't come up with a good solution. Like humanism would be the easy one, but you know, that just takes some time. But I do see the power and the bonding element of Christianity. But I'm just insulted when people say they're Christians and they don't take it seriously. Like it really, because we did take it seriously. Like we studied it, we studied it for years, and we know what we're
Yeah.
talking about. And then when someone comes along and says, "Nah, I don't think so," and I ask them a basic Bible question, they have no fucking clue. It's like it's infuriating.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. Oddly enough, as you're asking where, where, where my faith is in relation to me, yeah, it's at the core of who I am. Does my Christianity look different than what it looked like, let's say, when I went to Maranatha? Absolutely. Far more open to uh, really I think a more compassionate God than the one I was raised with. Uh, and and I think I'm definitely better for it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I have found that to be the core of myself, and definitely not the Republican Party.
Yeah, yeah. That's I am glad to see that that's a more common well, at least from people I know. That seems to be a more common position, like as time goes by, because like you can only hold on to like the hatred and the bitterness for so long. You're like, okay, what are we doing here? you realize that worshiping a political party is insane. Like no matter what party it is, you have to make your own decisions there. But
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
because I've seen believe me, I've seen it, I'll just say in the older generation that that's the other thing. Not only just people I've grown up with, but if you observe the older generation that is consumed by the culture war,
yeah,
they're not happy.
no, no,
They won they got the Supreme Court, they got their guy in the White House for 4 years, but they're not happy. When their religion is based on conspiracy theories,
yeah.
is based on outrage, is based on, in some cases, anti-Semitism. They're not happy. So yeah, they have their religion. It's an empty one, and yeah, and so your result of right-wing politics being your religion is depressing.
So you're right, 100%. They're the least happy people on the planet. But I think a lot of that stems from the fact that winning, like they can win elections, like less and less lately, but they can win elections, they can actually be in power. But what they can't win is like goodwill from the public. Like that doesn't happen. Like
Yeah.
like media and pop culture and young people and academia, they want, like, this is like why Trump has all the money in the world, but he's still fundamentally insecure. It's because he knows that all the people in like in popular media despise him. And so like that's what he wants. He wants that validation. And it's why they like conservatives shit on Hollywood for being liberal all the time, but then
Mhm.
just like can't stop sucking off any conservative actor that they find, they love pumping out there because they want to be accepted by broader media. I want to close out with this. I wasn't planning on it, but you mentioned the anti-Semitism, because I got to tell you, I I don't remember a lot of anti-Semitism when I was in the evangelical Christian right. At least not
Mhm.
overt anti-Semitism. And looking back on it, I can see like the inklings of it, especially with the whole Israel thing and how like they're yearning for the destruction of the Jews. But I hear people talk all the time. It's like, oh, the Christian right, they really hate the Jews. I don't remember seeing that at all. And I was looking at the only time I remember hearing like some overtly anti-Semitic shit, which I didn't even realize it was at the time, when I was in high school and my church was having a revival, and we had a preacher come up there, and he said that if you ever see a Jewish guy in front of a building, uh, holding a can selling pencils, if you come back a year later, he'll own the pencil company and the can company. And I didn't know what the hell he was talking. I was like, what does that have to do with being Jewish? And it was years later that I found out the money thing. But I mean, I don't remember hearing a lot of like overt anti-Semitism, other than the fact like every other religion goes to hell, so they weren't unique in that aspect. But do you remember
Right.
seeing a lot of that?
No, not in religious circles. No, I mean on
Yeah,
occasion. I mean on occasion, like only what you demonstrated, the occasional dumb joke.
yeah.
Well, as far as the anti-Semitism that I'm referring to when it comes to that the political Christian right is being wrapped
Oh
up in
yeah,
is specifically with Trumpism. A lot of the conspiracy theories that they believe in, a lot, and Christians who get wrapped up in the culture war. This is all one big meatball sandwich. Um, is that all their conspiracies about us versus them, and about the left is so dangerous because they're trying to take over the world. There's a whole big reset that they're worried about that coming from the political left. But it all is root. A lot of it is rooted in these old theories about anti-Semitism, about rich Jewish people
yeah,
donating money to the left, creating people like George Soros as this big boogeyman
yeah.
to scare people. And they only see it as, and people that I know, who only see it as just, the left and their terrible conspiracy,
Right.
when what they bought into is anti-Semitism. And
Yeah.
some of these people are Christians, the same people who supposedly worship a Jewish God.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's been my experience too, that they believe a lot of conspiracy theories that are, offshoots or, basically carbon copies of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories without saying the anti-Semitic part. And I don't even think a lot of them are aware of it. Like I really don't think they're even aware of it. Like I wouldn't have been at the time. Now, as time has gone on, it's gotten a lot worse. I mean, I am anti-Semitism has always been the strangest, like, conspiratorial obsession to me. It's never made sense to me.
Never made that only. And I speaking as actually my and this topic has come up of where does it come from. I talked to my wife, who is Jewish. My explanation for it is that's just my proof of Satan, because I have no explanation for why people, entire countries have decided to hate the Jewish people. They organize around it. In my perspective, yeah, that's just proof that there's Satan. That level of unexplainable evil proves to me that there's a supreme evil being out there that wants to wipe out God's chosen people, and develops all these terrible conspiracy theories that make no sense whatsoever. And yeah, there's like like racism as a whole, no reason for it, and yet it persists.
It's well, there's reasons. They're not good ones.
I mean, reason. I'm not saying
they're not good. They're not good ones.
I think you know. Yeah, I think
yeah.
you know, logical,
Yeah.
logical, ethical reason other than pure hate, pure selfishness, pure I have what I have and I don't want them to have what I have.
Yeah. And well, the Jewish thing, I'm sure you, I mean, you know this, but like at least for Europe, like I got where that originated. And it wasn't necessarily like the Catholic Church propagated like the Jews killed Christ thing. Like, it was in 1964 until the Vatican rescinded their doctrine that the Jews are collectively responsible for the death of Christ. It was 1964 that they got rid of that doctrine. But for Europe, for those of you who don't know, in medieval times and pre-medieval times, like in Christian Europe, you couldn't start a bank back then because the Bible forbids you from, charging interest.
Right,
so
from lending, yeah.
Yeah, so the only so guess who wasn't limited by that rule? It was Jewish people, because they weren't Christians. Like, yeah, we'll charge your interest all day long. So that's how Jewish people got into banking in Europe, and bankers are hated pretty much across the board. And that's one reason that it spread in European circles, and the fact that they were an outside group, like they were a minority, and so it's like they had their own little communities, and so people were afraid of them, and they worshiped this primitive version of the real God, and so it bothered folks, and it kind of trickled down from there. One thing I like to point out is a lot of people like to pretend that European anti-Semitism just popped out of nowhere with Adolf Hitler, like in 1939 or something. It's like, no, folks, this goes pretty deep. The Catholic Church, like we mentioned, would institute just pogroms, just destroying Jewish communities for over 1,000 years. And Martin Luther, the founder of Protestantism and Lutheranism, he wrote a pamphlet called On the Jews and Their Lies. Like that's and if you read it, it is like a textbook guide to Kristallnacht. It is, Jewish people need to be run out of the community. Their houses should be burned down. Their businesses should be confiscated. Any who remain should be put in work camps. Like, that's exactly. So yeah, it didn't start with Adolf Hitler. Like, it started way back. And the racism thing is, racism is not funny, obviously. It's not funny, but it's absurd. It is absurd. And there's a writing by Ben Franklin, like in the late 1700s or something. And he was saying that he thought that the United States of America should be a nation for white people. He was an abolitionist, but like he thought that this is a white country. And what's fascinating is reading who Ben Franklin considered to be white. Like it is incredible. Like he didn't consider Irish people to be white, obviously,
Oh yeah,
Italian
yeah, yeah.
people to be white,
Right.
Swedish people, he didn't consider them white. Pretty much the only people he considered white were English people and a subset of German people. And he only included the German people because the British people descended from the Anglo-Saxons who were from Germany, so he kind of had to. Like he was kind of mapped into a corner there. But I've always found it funny as a kid when I watch these old movies and white people would be racist against other white people. Like you'd see a movie, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm an Irish guy and I'm dating a Polish girl, and my mom, she's not gonna go for that. I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's another white person. And
Yeah.
and it's funny, like the funny thing to us is that they didn't consider Irish people white, like the whitest people on planet Earth, but they didn't consider Irish people white, which is really
Yes.
funny. Huh?
Yes, you're exactly right. The whitest people on earth are like, no, you can't trust
Nope, sorry.
those
Sorry. Yeah,
red-haired monsters.
I know. Yeah. Like I
Yeah.
it's a I'd lose you in a snowstorm, but you are not white enough. I'm sorry. And it was a there was shit, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So now some people I do understand why they think it's like I get not was like, okay, Italian people aren't white. Okay, all right, I get that one. Like that one, all right, I can see why they said that. And which is why I consider Irish people the biggest fucking traitors when it comes to like adopt because in the late 1800s and early 1900s, there was like a collective realism, like the Gilded Age and shit, where like the big wigs were making fat stacks and everyone was working 6 days a week for 12 hours for shit pay. And everyone, black, white, or otherwise, realized they were getting screwed over and that rich people were making off a lot of money to make their lives miserable. So that's when you had like a growing socialist movement in the United States, like in the early 1900s. And when people like of all races banded together and said, we're going to fight for things like, a 5-day work week, we're going to fight for 8 hours a day and fighting for more and more worker rights. And the capitalists decided, okay, this is getting out of hand here. We need to solve a problem. So they offered like ethnic minorities a deal. It's like, hey, Italian people, we're going to consider you white now, as long as the real enemy are black people. And Irish people like, all right, we'll take that deal. And they took it. And so that's really
Right.
this is why you don't see well, first off, there's just a higher percentage of black people in the United States than there are in Europe, but like the deep schisms like that, because Europeans actually went more with like the socialist economic movement, but in the United States, we're like, okay, we're going to divide you amongst racial lines and make the enemy is not your boss. The enemy is the black guy who might try to, make more money than you. And it's worked really well. Like racism is absurd, but it works. It works.
Right. Which, yeah, it's absurd. Which is why, it's good to have unifying things
Yes.
because, things like religion, because especially in the area of politics and things, it's, and it's this only, I bring this up only to prove the point of we haven't arrived when it comes to, the talk about racism, that, it hasn't, just magically gone away.
Yeah.
And most of the time when we're talking about America, we are talking about racism towards black people,
Mhm.
but also anti-Semitism hasn't gone away
No, no.
because whenever you think about that, usually you're referencing the Holocaust. However, it is amazing when you give people the size of the window that you give people to have the opportunity to be a racist if they will take it. Because in any, whatever the case may be, whether it's, the political right, or with their conspiracy theories, or in the cases of when we're talking about currently with Israel and Palestine, and there's the whole, Zionist, anti-Zionist stuff
Mhm.
going on. And so there is this opportunity of, you know, disagreeing with the Israeli government and their actions is one thing, but then there is also another group that takes that
Yep.
opportunity with their like, oh, this is my opportunity
Oh,
to be anti-Semitic. And so within a legitimate argument of hey, maybe not everything that the Israeli government is doing is correct here, guys. Maybe they've gone too far. And then there's the, oh, this is my opportunity to say crap
Yes.
about Jewish people because and they just take that opportunity. That only just goes to prove how much work still needs to be done when it comes to racism.
God, yeah, we hunger for the racism. We hunger for it. And it's like, listen, I I feel you so much with that Zionism statement because yeah, I've been saying for no, like I'm the only one saying this, but it's like yeah, criticizing the actions of a nation state does not mean you're criticizing an entire ethnic group. That's ridiculous. Like I can criticize Saudi Arabia, it doesn't mean I hate all Muslims. That's insane. So uh it it annoys me so fucking much that you have like these right-wing racists. There's like what I tell you about the Jews, man. I told you, and they're saying, and I
Right.
just got it. I hate it so much. And like you said, they have the opportunity in front of them, they will jump at it, and it's infuriating, man. I hate it.
Right. As long as they have the cover of a
Oh
political stance and they cover it in that, when really what they're doing is just taking the opportunity to be racist.
yeah, they are. It's like it's race is funny to me too because I remember, yeah. So people come in like 5 colors and that's it. There's like 5 colors, but there's dozens of races for some reason. And like you could meet a guy from like, Melanesia or Sri Lanka who looks exactly like me. I'm the only one that's black. They're Asian, they're Southeast Asian. It's just my favorite. My favorite example about how race is a social, well, two favorite examples, race is a social construct is one is in Haiti. And in Haiti, before the Haitian Revolution, under French colonization, there were like, so in the United States, you had white, you had black, and then mulatto is what they had in the United States back in the 1800s. In Haiti, there were, I forget, there were at least 12, maybe 15 or so racial categories based on how black your ancestry was. Like you were slotted into those categories. And like your rights as a person depended on how black you were. Like, oh, you have a black great great grandparent. All right, well, here's your slot. And they had a name for you. And the other example is Plessy versus Ferguson, the Supreme Court case that gave us separate but equal. And
Mm-hmm.
Homer Plessy was a civil rights activist. I can't remember what state, some state in the South. And he a black man who purposefully sat on a white train car and waited for the cops to come kick him off. And he's like, well, what's the law saying I can't sit here? And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says, okay, you can separate black and white train cars, but they have to be equal. Yeah, wink. But the hilarious thing about this is Homer Plessy was 1/8 black. Like if you look at a picture of Homer Plessy, he's a white guy. He has one black great grandparent, and under like United States law, he
Right.
was black. And
Right.
so and it's like, okay, this doesn't make any sense at all. And so if you look at uh sorry to drop the news on you guys with this, but white slave owners raped a lot of their slaves, a lot of them, like to the extent that your average at black American United States is 20% white. I'm 20% white. I have my DNA check, and that's not due to recent, recent consensual sexual relationship between white and black. No, that's from like, over a century of white people raping my ancestors. The white people were my ancestors too. But anyway, this guy, so like you had your white slavers, including like presidents, like Thomas Jefferson, famously,
That was the first one that came to mind.
yeah, raped a 14-year-old girl. So he was a child molester too. William Henry Harrison had 6 children with a black slave, which it's rape, by the way. You own the person's property, it's always rape. And he like had to hide them from the public because he didn't want people to know. And Thomas Jefferson, like the children he had with Sally Hemings,
Mm-hmm.
he had like 4 of them, I think, and they were slaves too. Like he enslaved his own fucking children. Like that's how depraved the shit was.
Oh,
And by the way, and people like try to argue that. Listen, don't try to argue that this wasn't common. Like if you give men ownership of women, what do you think they're going to do? Like we all
right.
know what's going to go on here, but this was so commonplace that like you had like mixed race slaves, and they became the house slaves because they were seen as more presentable than their thick-lipped counterparts, that out in the fields and shit. And so, which, if they were women, that just gave them easier access, to sexually assault them. And you can find pictures in like the 1850s of propaganda that abolitionist propaganda. What they would send out these pictures of slaves who were white, because they had so much white ancestry, they didn't look black at all. And so you'll find pictures of like there's a little black boy and a little white girl. They're both slaves because technically they're both black because the white girl has like a black ancestor from 80 years ago. So technically she's black. And they would use this as propaganda. It's like, we got to free these slaves. Some of them are white. And it worked. I mean, it's unfortunate that it took a lot of that, but it worked. It's fucked up.
I see. They had to go to hey, no, guys, we got to rescue the white people.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
The cruelty that's being done to black people isn't enough.
No, yeah.
You gotta be like, oh wow.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture. I'll send you a picture afterward. But like, there's this poster, and it's a little black boy, and a little white girl. They're both slaves. Girl is white as fuck. Like Michael Jackson's kid's white, and like it's like everyone, and it's like okay, and so that helped turn hearts and minds to the abolition movement more and more. But yeah, it's like. So the idea that, there's these definite lines of demarcation in a race, it's completely made up and it's nonsense, but it's still here. It's still here. And I mean, eventually I think we will get past it, and it won't be in our lifetimes or our kids' kids, but I think eventually human beings will find a way to eradicate it. But it's unfortunate to watch it, explode. And at this time, we should be way over this by now.
Yeah, we should be. And I think it would help, at least for as we were talking about religion and politics, I think it would help in the area of racial relations, if the people who say they believe in the God who died for everyone and loves everyone would love those same people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would solve our culture war a lot easier if they remembered that God loves gay people, God died for trans people.
Are we sure? Are we sure? I don't know. I don't know. It's Greg Locke seems to think otherwise.
Because last as we paraphrased that Bible verse at the top of the podcast about God so loving the world, and as we understand that includes everyone, that includes the people who disagree with you.
Mm-hmm.
That includes the people that don't see the world that you do, that don't look like you, that don't act like you, that don't love the same way that you do. That's what that verse that they have in they used to have in football stadiums. That's the God they say that they serve, and yet they don't love the same people that God loves.
No, God.
So I think I think if they would, yeah, I think a lot of the people who have it, and it would solve our culture war if they loved the same people that their God loved. I think it would be a little easier.
A little bit, just a little bit. Well, hey man, thanks for coming on board. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna fumble around my best trying to like edit this shit and process it. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm trying. It's something I've always wanted to do. When I was a little kid, what I really wanted was a radio show. Like as a kid, I've always wanted that. I always thought that would be cool. So the chance that I have the opportunity to do this is very exciting. But I'm in the early stages now, so just it's I'll look back on this a couple years from now and think it's a shitty. But I'm gonna try to do my best. I promise. My first one can't even post, so we'll see how this goes.
Well, thanks for having me. This is a blast. As somebody who's done a podcast for at least this type of
What's the name of that podcast, by the way?
Yes, at least my podcast. Okay, I've got to plug two podcasts because my friend Kevin will be upset with me. The podcast me and my friend Kevin do is called Podomania. We
I don't know that one.
That one we have competing top 5 lists.
Oh, I don't know that one. Okay.
We talk about like TV and movies and things, and we give like our top 5 like Christmas movies or top 5 TV shows. So yeah, so Podomania is one that I do with my friend Kevin, and then the one that I've done for I want to say like the past 5 years is The Story Is, and that's my podcast.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. That was the one you were on that I talked about. I try to talk about, events from the past and the present, and then try to have like a personal bent to it, so that I not only tell a story, but if possible, an applicable lesson that this story tells. And if I have had you on my show before, looking back at the Christian college experience. So
Yeah,
if folks have enjoyed this episode, I think they'll probably enjoy the 3 episode series that we talked about. As
yeah,
I my own kind of revelation of the kind of comparing my Christian college experience with what other people's experience was and finding the difference.
yeah, yeah. One thing I neglected to do on this one, like we'll have to do this again. I wanted to have like a segment where we would discuss rules at the college that no one would believe were actually rules. Like it's like I we've got to do that next time because I don't know about you, but in my personal life, I never talk about like where my undergrad. I never talk about it. I was like, oh yeah, I went to school in Wisconsin. Give no details because
No, yes, never.
because
Never.
like once you do, like it's you can't possibly relay this information. Yeah, if you wanted to go on a date, you had to sign a piece of paper and bring some. It's like hey, there's no point of reference anyone could have for this shit.
Yes. Oh, please have me back on to talk
Oh,
about
we
that.
got to do that.
Just the dating life alone, I think would fill up a podcast.
Oh yeah, yeah. My
The fact that they had chaperones for people who are adults.
grown ass adults, man. And they had rules about like you could hold hands, but only if you were engaged. Shit like that. It's like I remember being in one of Dr. Oates's classes, and someone asked about the holding hands rule. They're like, okay, how come we can't hold hands? And Dr. Oates is like, well, if you hold hands, that could lead you to doing other things that are sinful. And then I don't remember who said it, but he's like, okay, but couldn't staring into someone's eyes also lead to something sinful? He's like, yeah, I guess that's a good point. Yeah, no shit. That's a ridiculous rule. My favorite though, and I would say this there, but we'll have plenty of ammo next time. My favorite one though is the women wearing pants one. That one was like I so women couldn't wear pants and then except unless they were like bowling or going to something, they had certain events where they were allowed to wear pants, but
Yeah,
like for classroom and on campus they had to be in dresses or skirts, and they could wear shorts if they were playing basketball, but that's it,
right.
and and the pants could not be jeans. Like I remember that's the one I was like, what, they couldn't wear jeans. And so I was like, so they have to wear khakis or slacks, they couldn't wear jeans. And so,
Yeah.
like the year after I left, like my last year of Maranatha, I remember they had a board that came out with a new rule that says, okay, women can wear jeans now. And I was like, okay, finally. Like, but
Yeah.
the jeans could not be blue. That was like, I don't know if they said women can wear jeans, they can't be blue. And people was like, wait a minute, why can't they be blue? And the answer was, well, because, blue jeans were made in the 1800s for, people doing manual labor and working in mines, and it's a symbol of masculinity. So black jeans or gray jeans or purple jeans are fine. Blue are out of the question. I was like, you guys are not fucking serious. Like, there's no way you think that is a logical, reasonable policy to put in place. I mean, in a long list of others, it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. Wow. My sideburns past my ears even think that's amazing.
Right? Yeah, it was the dumbest one by far, and there are a lot of dumb ones. But anyway, we'll save these. We'll save. We'll have another time talk about the rules. That'll be pretty fun. I think we'll have a good time with that. But
For sure.
thanks so much, man. I appreciate it. I'll try to get these out, when I can. And hopefully I do you proud.
No, thank you very much for having me.
All right, peace out.